Welcome to Mystara for a deep dive into a deep dive. The creatures of the world below. The subterranean monsters of Mystara. The area between the surface and the hollow world is filled with all sorts of nasties to make it one of the deadliest places on the planet. If the shifting caverns and poison gases don't get you, there's a ton of creepy crawlies just waiting to finish the job. There are a few safe places to rest, and some fell creature or another is always willing to claim the few stable areas. Well, time to meet the murderer's row of bad guys. I'm Mr. Welch, and try not to look tasty. To qualify for this list, the creature has to be primarily subterranean, i.e. spend most of their time underground, only emerging on the surface to feed. The creatures must be considered abominations or monstrosities using the current classification method to exclude the humanoids that also dwell there, with a couple of exceptions. I let particular creatures off like the scamille because they appear in a more focused video on their specific creature type. Lastly, there's a few common monsters that are the Mystara version of other D&D monsters, like the Hook Horrors and the Umber Hulks, so that I can showcase the differences between their cousins on other worlds. The great Annelids start the list and deserve the right to go first. These things resemble a horrific cross between an earthworm and a sandworm and are primarily responsible for a significant number of the caverns found in the world below. You will first notice that they're about 1,000 feet long. Well, okay, it's not hard to see that. They burrow at incredible speeds, up to 80 feet around. They swallow anything that gets in their way, but they don't actually do a lot of damage, as living creatures aren't their normal prey. One rather strange and horrific trait about them is their breeding habits. All the worms are hermaphrodites, but they don't give birth without the help of earth elementals. By help, I mean they lure the elementals close by somehow resembling a vein of ore, then using unknown means to paralyze the elemental, lay eggs in its body. The eggs hatch weeks later, and the young devour the elemental. Still trying to figure out why they only target earth elementals, but it does make great Annelids rather memorable. Bargdas are the cousins of the Minotaur, only larger, diseased, and twisted by a curse. Instead of a bull's head, they have a ram's head, though a ram with severe birth defects. They are hideous to look at, with pus flowing from open sores and exposed bone where the flesh is rotted away. Characters have to make a saving throw to be able to look at one without flinching. That ugly. They also carry a nasty disease they transmit through biting. The disease causes the victim to lose dexterity every day, though a cure disease will reverse this. Bargdas form family groups and hate all other living creatures. They will tolerate larger humanoids like trolls, ogres, and hill giants, but to use them as slaves, and they don't consider those creatures as equals by any measure. Chokers are the bane of dwarves and a plague of the lower parts of Rockhome. They have spread across the world below to become a threat to other creatures, but they are still found in the greatest numbers near dwarven settlements. Chokers are barely humanoids, as their limbs are more like tentacles than actual arms and legs. They are solitary ambush predators, extending their limbs to grapple and strangle victims that pass below. The limbs have sharpened cartilage that extends through the flesh that they use to cut their victims into smaller pieces for eating. If the victim can break free of the choker's attack, it will flee instead of fighting back. They aren't much of a threat in a fair fight, a fact they're keenly aware of. Deep Glorons are one of Mystara's biggest mysteries, as what we don't know about them is as intriguing as what we do. They're 8-foot-tall humanoids with undersized wings on their back and every limb ending in razor-sharp claws. They get their names from their calls when they detect prey. When they are stalking a potential meal, they're eerily silent despite their size. Their wings are used for swimming and climbing rather than flying, though they can fall without injury because of them. They aren't considered intelligent creatures, but they can use tools and magic items and set traps. They work in teams, but they never appear in groups. It is known they're found in greater numbers the further you go from the surface. Rumors swirl regarding an entire civilization of them, complete with cities. Still, if the rumors are true, nobody's ever visited a deep Gloront city and survived to tell the tale. Makes you wonder where the rumors come from. The first Snaka is one big contradiction in terms of gameplay and creature lore. On paper, it's terrifying. 70-foot-long cousin of the purple worm that breathes fire and glows from its internal body heat. Then you see it has one attack that does 1d8 points of damage from a single bite, unless it breathes fire for 2d6 points of damage. It's got a lot of hit points, but it isn't much of a threat to a party because it only does one low damage attack a turn. And even then the damage is just a danger to low-level characters. It burrows around looking for ores and minerals to eat, and when it's mating time, it spits out 2d6 red worms, the larval form of the first Snaka. What a name, just first Snaka. It's a bit of a disappointment. When you run into a worm creature that's 10 feet across and 70 feet long, you expect it to do more damage than a first-level fighter when it bites you. It's said to be intelligent, though only with a score of 5. But you can bargain with them. They aren't carnivorous, but you have to figure out how you're supposed to communicate with a giant worm as they don't have limbs and can't speak. Red worms, as mentioned, are the larval form of the first Snaka. They're found in groups of 2d6 nearby a sleeping first Snaka. After the adult form spits out the larva, it has to sleep for 50 years while its spawn battle each other until only one remains. They don't spit fire and only have a handful of hit points, but they do have a poison bite that requires a saving throw or take double damage. When you find them, there will be a mama for Snaka nearby, who will get angry if disturbed. Not like it's a threat to even a medium-level party, though. Mystara does have its versions of the Hook Whore and the Umber Hulk, though locally they are known as the Hook Beast and the Hulker. The Hook Whore is the same as the ones in other settings, with hooks for hands, keen hearing, poor sight, and communicating through clicking. They have animal-level intelligence and don't use tools, which makes sense considering they don't have fingers. Hulkers are their cousins, which are the more intelligent race and tend to lead the Hook Whores in raiding parties. Hulkers don't have the same confusion ability as Umber Hulks. They do have excellent eyesight, letting them see across multiple spectrums. If you want to use the regular versions of the Umber Hulks, go for it. Most people forget they're even in Mystara. Lava lizards are one of the more numerous lizard creatures found in Mystara. They can be found basking near streams of lava where they flourish. Their one particular attack and defense is their incredible body heat. They're about the size of a giant monitor lizard, but they aren't aggressive, preferring to lounge near the magma pools. Their bite does 1d6 damage, but requires a saving throw to avoid taking additional damage from the lizard's internal heat. Any metal weapon that strikes one, again, triggers a saving throw, with failure meaning the weapon melts after dealing damage. It doesn't set wood on fire for some reason, so break out the clubs. Or avoid the lava lizards altogether, because to get close to one, you pretty much have to be standing in lava. The Lake Clinty monster, or Clinty as the dwarves call it, is a mythical creature that lives in Lake Clinty on the surface, but has been seen in the underground water sources of Rockhome, making many believe that the surface lake is connected to the world below somehow. It's said to be a sea serpent of unknown type and is usually blamed for any disappearance near the lake's surface. Many people believe the missing dwarves are more likely of too much drinking near a body of water. After all, dwarves are not known for their buoyancy. In reality, Clinty is a breed of dinosaurs that inhabit the local waterways. They're not numerous, which explains why they're rarely seen. They exist on fish, and the rumors behind the dwarf disappearances are false. The creatures are shy. Any attack results in them fleeing. The stories about Clinty have taken up a life of their own, a fiction that the actual creature can't hope to live up to. Skin wings are the best known of the creatures of the world below, being used by numerous races as beasts of burdens. The domesticated flying lizards are found on the surface of the Shadow Elves, the dwarves of Rockhome, and the humanoids of Oinkmar. The Shadow Elves use them the most, being used as mounts and hauling cargo or troops in case of attack. The skin wings can typically only carry smaller races. The ones used by the dwarves are the largest known examples and can only carry a single dwarf. The breed used by the Shadow Elves is a bit stouter, allowing it to haul cargo or multiple Shadow Elves. In combat, the creature will almost always flee, and the damage they inflict anyways is minimal. They will instead take to the skies while their attacker is left behind. The skin wings can't survive on the surface, one of the few traits that keep their use restricted to the world below. The Boneless is one of the most feared abominations found in the world below. It looks nothing more than just a stone outcropping until you get close. Then it reveals its true form after it releases a magical ore that requires would-be attackers to save or run in fear. Then the Boneless shows everybody its worm-like nature and attacks. The one word that best describes the Boneless is acidic. It's coated with an acidic slime. It spits acid at its foes. And when you kill it, it explodes in a shower of, you guessed it, acid. Despite limited intelligence, it doesn't attack wounded foes, letting them scream in agony as the acid eats at their flesh. It goes after fleeing prey or anyone freshly joining the battle. Survivors have given records that the worm seems almost sadistic in its choice of targets. There might be something to this, as the creature prefers to maim rather than kill, at least until the fight is over. Night Glutes are the bane of the Five Shires, and their origins are unknown. Picture 12-foot-long eels with dragonfly wings and a taste for hen flesh. They nest far below ground and only come to the surface to feed, specifically when they get a taste for hen. This is by far their favorite food, leading many in the Shires to believe the Wizards of Glantry created the creatures. A night gleed attacks by trying to latch onto the victim and drain its blood. They have no bones, meaning bludgeoning weapons do little damage to them. Once it gets its fill of blood, it flies back to the cave to digest. Killing one can be a very bad thing, as night gleets are attracted to the smell of their own blood. They will attack any creature with night gleet blood on it, except for one of their own. They will swarm the unfortunate creature, though this seems to be instinctual rather than a form of revenge. No matter your reputation, a job is always waiting for you if you hunt night gleets in the Shire. Slime worms are one of the nastier creatures you can find below ground, mainly because of their choice of ambush tactics. They're attracted to piles of coins or gems, typically in the lair of nastier creatures like dragons. The worms then attach a good amount of treasure by rolling in the hoard using their adhesive slime, and waiting for stupid adventurers to get close. It's a risk, as dragons don't appreciate you getting their treasure all sticky. But for the worms, they figure out once you've taken care of the dragon, you'll be too weak to fight them. It's not a bad scheme, though if the dragon or the party discovers the worm, they aren't long for the world. Steam weevils by themselves aren't that dangerous. Unfortunately, you will only encounter them in the hundreds. These tiny insects are found near geothermal heat sources, typically magma deposits. Here they have somehow turned the ambient heat of their surroundings into a food source. They must be near heat sources to survive. They quickly die in colder temperatures. It's best to avoid them, but considering they glow from their excessive body heat, that really isn't that hard. On rare occasions when a volcano erupts, they will be ejected to the surface, where the insects will swarm in a panic before dying in a few hours. They can kill unprotected people or livestock in this period, but if a volcano just went off, you probably have more things to deal with than superheated gnats. The Rockhome Lizard is one of the more common creatures in the world below. The dwarves have domesticated them, hence the name. They are usually found in packs of up to a dozen and are used to pull carts, can be used as mounts, and if left to their own devices, hunt down vermin like rats and chokers. They sicken and die in direct sunlight and are entirely nocturnal. They aren't dangerous to larger creatures, but will provide a strong bite if threatened. While the bipedal lizards are a staple in Rockhome, performing every sort of task a beast can undertake, outside the Dwarven Kingdom they're a source of food for the nastier creatures. That wraps up the creatures of the world below, ranging from benign to homicidal. There's a bunch of continuity problems due to rules and fluff disparities. Some sound awesome, but grotesquely underpowered. Still, if your players want to go spelunking, a few creatures will make them regret it. Next week, I'm going to try to expand some background lore by introducing the Skulderfjord, Emperor Thinkal's hand-picked bodyguard from the frozen north. Until next time, who falls for the unguarded treasure pile? Seriously, of all the tropes, that one has to be the most obvious trap in D&D. Anybody who sees a bunch of treasure just lying there and thinks to start scooping it up without checking for traps or monsters or ambushes deserves to be eaten by a slime worm.